Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're going to be getting started here in about 1 minute. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Vouchers Disguised as Scholarships Town Hall. We appreciate you making time out of your busy schedule in the second week of the year to join us. All right, good evening, everyone. I am going to get us started. We have a very packed agenda tonight, and so welcome. We will start off our evening with a quick welcome. We're going to talk about what's at stake. We'll be having a fireside chat with some amazing experts on the issue, and then we'll be doing some closing and some next steps. Like we like to start at the top of our call, I see we have squad already in the chat because people are already saying where they're calling in from. Please introduce yourself, share your name and your pronouns. Let us know what city you're calling in from. And for today, I wanted to keep it simple and ask folks, who are they? And so I started with an example for myself. I am showing up today as a mother, an advocate, and a concerned community member. Feel free to drop in the chat who you are and say hello to a neighbor as we get started. This evening, our call will be moderated by our Chief of Campaigns, Amanda Hollowell. I'm going to bring her up. She is leading our campaigns team and executing our mission and leading campaigns that make real world impact and change for Black folks in America. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring Amanda Hollowell up.
Thank you, Destiny, so much. It's always great to be able to share screen with you. I know that this has been a busy week for most folks, and I'm just really excited to be here. I love to see everyone in the chat. We've got folks from my hometown, Savannah, Georgia. Okay, Beaufort. Okay, Arizona. So this is going to be a great night. I am unbelievably excited to be able to do what I'm going to do tonight, which is introduce our new president and CEO of Color of Change, Nadine Smith. They are a nationally recognized civil rights leader and Time 100 honoree. The founding executive director of Equality Florida, Nadine has spent 3 decades on the front lines of civil rights battles, demonstrating what it takes to win in one of the nation's most politically hostile environments. And that's Florida, again, you guys. A former award-winning journalist, Smith is known for pairing strategic organizing with narrative clarity, coalition building, and a deeply intersectional approach that links racial justice, reproductive freedom, LGBTQ equality, and voting rights as inseparable struggles. Please, everyone, welcome Nadine Smith.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. It's good to be with everyone. Good evening. I'm Nadine Smith, and I'm honored to join you, as Amanda said, as the new president of Color of Change. And I want to start by thanking the National Education Association for this partnership. And I want to personally thank President Becky Pringle for taking time to join us tonight. We are so thrilled to have this partnership because it is so important at this moment that we link arms in these dangerous times. Together, our organizations represent millions of people who understand that public education is the foundation of democracy. And right now, that foundation is under attack. Private school vouchers are being sold to us as choice and freedom, but we need to be clear about what they really are. They're a shakedown, they're a scheme to defund public schools, to funnel taxpayer dollars to unaccountable private institutions and leave Black children and working families with fewer resources and fewer opportunities. Now, I've spent nearly 3 decades fighting for justice in Florida, at the tip of the spear, watching what happens when extremists dismantle public institutions. And I've seen their playbook. And now we're seeing it rolled out nationwide. Attacks on public education, on diversity and inclusion, on truth in our classrooms. But here's what else I know from those front lines. Every act of resistance matters. Even when the wins feel small, even when we're just slowing them down, it accumulates like sand in the gears. And we will win by organizing, mobilizing, and holding the powerful accountable. We win by making it impossible for them to ignore us and too politically costly for them to continue. That's what this partnership is about. Over the next year, we're bringing together Color of Change's membership with NEA's organizing strength to defend public education, expose the corporations and politicians attacking our schools, and make sure Black parents and caregivers have the information and power to fight back. Tonight is just the beginning. We're here to learn, to organize, and to act because our children deserve fully funded public schools. So I'm here both as the new president and CEO of Color of Change, but also as a parent of a 14-year-old who cares deeply about the education that he's allowed to get or that he is denied. And all of our kids deserve educators who are respected and supported, and they deserve leaders who will fight for them, not sell them out. So thanks for joining us. Let's get to work.
Thank you, Nadine, so much. We appreciate that. And I, too, as a parent of a college graduate who went through all of his educational career through public education, know exactly how important this moment is. And I just can't tell you guys, y'all getting the best night ever. You are not just getting our new CEO and president, Nadine Smith, you are also getting the president, Becky Pringle of NEA, who's a fierce social justice warrior, defender of educator rights, an unrelenting advocate for students and communities of color, and a valued and respected voice in education arena. A middle school social science teacher with more than 3 decades of classroom experience. Becky is singularly focused on using her intellect, passion, and purpose to unite the members of the largest labor union within the entire nation and using that collective power to fulfill the promise of public education. Everyone give some ones and some claps, and please welcome NEA President Becky Pringle.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and welcome, Nadine, to this incredible partnership. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. As we gather together, these words are echoing in my head and in my heart. Of all the civil rights for which this world has fought and died for 5,000 years, the right to learn is the most fundamental. The freedom to learn has been bought by bitter sacrifice. So, whatever you might think about the curtailment of other civil rights, you must fight to the last ditch to keep open the right to learn. As we begin this evening, I want you to be grounded in those words of writer, activist, and educator W.E.B. Du Bois. He reminds us of this nation's non-negotiable responsibility to ensure that every student, not one, not some, but every single student, has access to a quality public education system that will help them define their future and empower them all with the resources and access and opportunities they need to make those futures real. I am so grateful for the strong partnership that exists between the NEA and the Color of Change. Our alliance is critical. It's critical to NEA's fight to reclaim public education as a common good, as the foundation of our democracy. And we know the people gathered here tonight especially know we can't stop there. We can't. We have to strengthen it in a way that we're transforming public education into something it was actually never designed to be, a racially and socially just and equitable system that prepares every student, every student to succeed in a globally diverse and interdependent world. It is such an honor to lead the 3 million member National Education Association, this nation's largest labor union. Our members are dedicated educational professionals who drive and teach and feed and nurture and counsel and care for and nurse more than 50 million public school students across this country. In this time in our nation's history, educators are clear that our work to promote, protect, and strengthen public schools is critical, and that we need to join forces with allies to help protect and empower Black families and communities. We know that has to be ongoing, and it is absolutely essential. So, on behalf of the education professionals across this nation, I thank you for joining us this evening and engaging with us and talking with us about the ways that vouchers harm our students, our schools, and this country. Amanda?
Madam President, thank you so much for those inspiring words. And what I get to do next is I am blessed to be able to ask you questions about where we are currently with public education. And I think the first question I'm going to ask you is, what is the role of public education in our society? And why is public education so important?
So, you heard Nadine say that public education is the foundation, the cornerstone of our democracy. And as educators, we not only believe that, we actually know it. We know to have an inclusive democracy, an economy that works for everyone and not just the privileged few, a society that is diverse and is equitable and is inclusive and where everyone has access. As I say to everyone, say the words, not just the letters that have been demonized, say the words. We know that public education is designed to prepare every student, everyone, for a healthy and joyful life, a fulfilling career, and community strengthening civic participation. And we know that the United States, and quite honestly, Amanda, not just the United States, public education is the cornerstone of any democracy. My dad was a history teacher, and he always said, Rebecca, that's what he called me when he was really mad or very serious. Rebecca, you need to know your history, family history, your Black history, which is part of American history. You need to know world history. You have to understand the rise and fall of civilizations and governments, and you can always pinpoint that when a government tries to take away the right for all of us citizens to have access to public education. And so here we are today. There are forces that are aligned not only to privatize public education, but to exploit wars in education, to alter the balance of power at every level of government, the local, state, and national level. And we must reject those efforts by self-serving politicians and their billionaire backers who push vouchers that take away money from our public schools, where 90% of our students are educated, where 95% of our students with disabilities rely on legally guaranteed supports and services. Their educations and futures must be the top priority of this country, because if this experiment in democracy is going to survive, We know that that is at the center of ensuring that we have a healthy and vital community, and one that can depend on its government to ensure access and opportunity for all.
Absolutely. And just hearing the story of, your father instilling you the importance of history, it hurts my soul to think where we are with education and where, the Department of Education is. But the question I want to lead into is the topic that we're here for, right? And why do you consider vouchers are the biggest threat to public education in this moment?
So without a doubt, I mean, the vouchers are one of the biggest and most pressing issues in public education today. The scale of the threat that vouchers pose to public education and civil rights, by the way, has grown exponentially in recent years. Vouchers transfer hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to private schools and homeschools with little or no academic standards or financial oversights. And we know that vouchers come in many forms. They didn't talk about that and all the pretty words that are surrounded by it. And proponents continue to draft these different versions to confuse people, giving them new names. But it doesn't change what they are. No matter what they call them, at their core, vouchers are designed. They're designed to undermine public education by siphoning taxpayer dollars meant for public schools and putting that into private hands. Take this new federal voucher program. They're calling it a scholarship. Nice name, right? When in fact, the program is expected to divert anywhere from 30 to 50 billion dollars away from our public schools. And I want to put that in perspective for you. So the federal government allocates, well, we continue to fight to make sure they're allocating at least this, but that's a battle. But they allocate $15 billion a year to support students with disabilities and $18 billion to support our Title I schools. Those are our schools and those are the resources that have been allocated for our students who are living in poverty, those who need that, those students and families that need that extra help. So Congress has potentially committed more funding to school vouchers than it has committed to the two largest pre-K 12 federal public education programs. I just want you to I want you to process that. Policymaking decisions are being backed by misguided and profit-focused the ideology of billionaires instead of research, which has documented over these years, over 3 decades. We have the research, the evidence to prove the negative impact of vouchers on large community schools and on the students themselves, from school closures to achievement declines to widespread discrimination, specifically against Black students, students from our LGBTQ communities, and those from specific religions too. And most vouchers in state programs go to families and children already in private schools who were never enrolled in public schools. It is a subsidy for a few at the expense of the many.
And I mean, that is just the best way to break it down. And I think, one thing that is really important is that, yes, we are sharing information, and yes, this information is very hard to hear, but there are things we can do. And so, what is NEA doing currently to promote and protect and strengthen public education, besides being an amazing organization and having a great dynamic leader who's motivating me to do something right now? What else can we do?
I got not to worry, I got stuff for you to do. Um, so we're not backing down, first of all. We're not backing down. We are fighting back because we have to fight back, but we're also fighting forward. We are talking with parents and community members about our vision of a public school that is full of joy and resources and access, that is safe and provides an inclusive curriculum for all of our students. We're talking about not only preparing them for the next journey in education, but for their careers and if they choose to college. So our strategy is what I call my seven verbs, Amanda. Seven verbs: educate, communicate, organize, mobilize, litigate, legislate, and elect the right people into positions of power. We are proudly working with partners like Color of Change to educate the public about the harms of vouchers and to prepare our friends and families and neighbors to tell their stories because we have families who have been thrown out of schools or not allowed to take advantage of going to a particular school based on discrimination. And so we want our neighbors to resist the spread of vouchers in communities and in our schools. NEA is at the forefront of fighting back in court against schemes to divert public schools away from public education and into private schools that are free and open to all students. In 2022 in Kentucky, NEA and a coalition of school districts and parents won a unanimous victory, striking down a school voucher program that would have diverted in Kentucky $25 million to private schools. And then 2 years later in South Carolina, NEA led a coalition of parents and pro-public education groups, including the State Congress of the NAACP, in obtaining a ruling striking down vouchers in the Palmetto State. And last year, we led coalitions of plaintiffs to obtain state court rulings in both Utah and Wyoming, finding vouchers were unconstitutional. We're playing both defense and offense at the same time. While fighting vouchers, it's really important. I started with this. We have to have a vision of what we want. And so our vision is that every school is a community school. And so we are working to spread a community school movement across the country, from California to Maryland and everywhere in between. And we help schools deeply engage with students and educators and families, taking that collective responsibility, especially for our students of color, so that all stakeholders can co-create a vision for their schools and for their communities by leveraging their local assets and turning grassroots vision into action. We will continue to stand united with our educators and parents and communities and allies and welcome new friends because we understand that our fates are intertwined. Dr. King talked about that, right? And that we must grow our coalition of education advocates.
Absolutely. He talked about that. I just over the weekend I saw King in the Wilderness, and that's such a good documentary, and it just really motivated me and regrounded me on why I'm here and why I do this work. What is our call to action?
So, Amanda, for generations of Black folk, education has been a lifeline of freedom and progress and empowerment, beginning with our formerly enslaved ancestors who helped to rewrite state constitutions, which a lot of people don't know, to establish the South's first system of free public education. For us, public education has long represented equity and community and civic participation and democratic principles. Tonight is just one step in continuing to defend all that our ancestors built and all that our students deserve. In collaboration with Color of Change, we have provided you, our participants, with a letter to submit to your governor's office. It urges your state to refuse to participate in the federal voucher program, which, just so you know, is a voluntary opt-in program. We're asking you to write them to make the right decision, to fully invest in our public schools. We're also, so that's number one. Number two, we're also asking you to talk to your friends and family and neighbors. And we're providing you with messaging tips to help you have those critical conversations, choosing those points that resonate most with you and you think will resonate with your family and friends. We want your voices to be heard. Let's force privateers to recognize the power of our community. Let's make sure that our nation's public schools are worthy of our students. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate your enthusiasm, your vision, and your bravery. And thank you for putting up the strong fight. And we appreciate all the great words you shared with us. And I am just so happy. And I know we're off screen. I think it's because of the nature of where we're sitting this. But y'all, Destiny, if you could give us 1 minute, if you could just take it off so Becky could just wave bye to folks while we move forward. There we go. Madam President, wave off, and we will be great. Thank y'all so much for tonight. Thank you, Madam President. We appreciate you all so much. And now we are going to move into our fireside chat. And I am just so excited about this part. If you guys did not, before we move into fireside chat, if you did not take action, we're dropping the link so you can email your governor tonight and let him know that you do not want them participating in this federal voucher program that ends up defunding public education in your state. And so we will be dropping that in the chat shortly. We dropped it earlier, but we're going to drop it a few more times to make sure everyone on this call is taking action with us. And so part two is our fireside chat with some great experts, and it's vouchers disguised as scholarships. And so we will roll into one of our featured speakers. Janelle George is an associate professor of law and the founding director of the Racial Equity in Education Law and Policy Clinic at Georgetown Law. Her work and scholarship focuses on racial stratification and inequality in U.S. public education, as mediated by government entities at the local, state, and federal levels. She has worked on transforming discriminatory school discipline practices with a national coalition and securing provisions in federal legislation to promote positive and inclusive school climates. All that means that she works real hard to make sure everybody has access to public education. And we want to thank you for her work. Our next speaker, next slide, is Dr. Lynn Dang. She's our senior policy specialist within the Education Policy and Implementation Center, or EPIC, at NEA. Her portfolio covers policies and programs related to K through 12 education, including but not limited to school vouchers and charter, community and magnet schools. She was previously an adjunct professor of research methods, state legislative staffer, and public school educator in the roles of substitute teacher, paraprofessional, and then tenured teacher. Please welcome Dr. Lynn Dang tonight. And next slide. Our last speaker is Marisol Garcia, who was elected the first woman of color and Chicana to serve as the president of the Arizona Education Association in May 2022. She was reelected to serve her second term in May 2025. She is currently leading the Arizona Education Association's task force for a new vision of Arizona schools, whose mission is to develop a vision for supporting successful public schools post-COVID-19. As a veteran middle school social studies teacher in the Isaac School District, she is committed to her students and their community. Please welcome Marisol Garcia. Ladies, if you will turn on your cameras and join me on screen, we will get started. Welcome, everyone. So, Becky has got me riled up. So I hope you guys just give more details and energy, and we're all just going to be running around saving public education across this country after this call tonight. So, first, I want to thank you for taking the time being here. And, our first question is, Lynn, Dr. Dang, we've been working on this for some weeks now, some months, and I really want you to set the groundwork of what are vouchers in this country.
Sure, thanks, Amanda. I'll just start by saying I am so thrilled to be here this evening to have this important and timely discussion with the Color of Change membership. I've been looking at the chat, everyone's like ready to go and fight, so thank you all. And it's just an added bonus for me to be speaking alongside such brilliant and influential leaders in the education space who all happen to be women, by the way. So I'm going to go ahead and answer your question. I like to answer the questions, what are vouchers? Um, by trying to be very objective here, right? So I decided to go a little old school and I consulted the dictionary, Merriam-Webster to be specific, to define vouchers for us today. So vouchers are defined as, I quote, a coupon issued by the government to a parent or guardian to be used to fund a child's education in either a public or private school, end quote. But as is evident from what we've heard so far, vouchers are primarily used for private education. So how do traditional vouchers actually work, right? So simply put, the government writes a check to pay for tuition at a private school on behalf of voucher recipients, which also begs the question, where does this money come from? Well, those funds distributed by the government are taxpayer dollars that would otherwise be used to fund our neighborhood public schools. Whereas President Pringle has already said 90% of the nation's children go. So vouchers divert public funds meant for public schools into private hands, oftentimes unregulated, not accountable to the public. But I'll stop there for now and I will elaborate further as we continue our fireside chat.
Thank you. And we love a good dictionary definition because why not? Just bring it back to basics. Janelle, could you shed some light of the origin of vouchers and how did they come about?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight, for tuning in. I'm really honored to be part of this collaboration between NEA and Color of Change. So I'm a law professor, not a historian, but I'll do a little bit of history here. So if we go back and we look at Brown versus Board of Education, or what we call Brown 1 in 1954, we saw the Supreme Court invalidate this whole regime of separate but equal segregated education. In Brown 2, which not a lot of people talk about, the following year, 1955, the Supreme Court told districts you have to desegregate with all deliberate speed. What happened, though, was that a lot of districts started to resisted that throughout the South, throughout the country. And they found a loophole. They realized if Brown versus Board of Education applies to public schools, then they could get around and evade integration or school desegregation by going to private schools. However, a lot of parents who resisted school desegregation didn't have the money to send their children to private schools. So that's where we saw the origins of and they didn't call them vouchers at the time. They went by different names. Some people called them freedom of choice plans, tuition grants. Basically, they were set up through these elaborate tax schemes to give white families that wanted to evade school integration public funds to send their children to private schools to maintain a dual segregated system of education. So these came to be known as segregation academies. Now, a lot of Black voters who, by the way, their taxpayer money was going to fund these tuition grants were totally disenfranchised and excluded from this. So these vouchers went to white families to send their kids to segregated all white private schools. So, for example, when Prince Edward County, Virginia, not far from where I live, closed their public schools for 5 years, that left Black families, in resistance to Brown, that left Black families with few educational options. But many white families could enroll their children with the help of these vouchers into these segregation academies. So, and then the state legislature enacted laws permitting the spread of these voucher programs. So if you look across the South from the 1960s to the 1980s, white children's enrollment in private schools increased by more than 200,000 students. And the civil rights attorneys like the NAACP, legal defense fund lawyers who had litigated Brown and resisted this, one of the lawyers, Oliver Hill, commented, no one in a democratic society has a right to have his private prejudices finance a public expense. But that's what happened. And unfortunately, segregative tactics have evolved over time. So this is what we're continuing to see happen with vouchers. Even though a lot of Black families are targeted and they're used as a face of these voucher programs and told this is a way to escape the public education system, in their origins and at bottom, they are segregative.
Okay. I'm taking from that one, you're great at history. Doesn't matter, you're a lawyer. Thank you. Two, segregation led to where we are today because, again, folks wanted an unequal representation and they did not want to integrate. And here we are, so many years later, still practicing, again, a discriminatory practice. This leads me to talk to Marisol out in Arizona. I know you guys are fighting some serious uphill battles out there, and thank you for that, first of all. And you're working very hard to keep vouchers out of your state. Could you kind of inform us origin, fight, present day, and how we're moving forward in Arizona against this voucher fight?
Sure. Again, like the other folks, I'll say thank you for inviting me. And I'm one of the very lucky 3 million NEA members that get to say Miss Madam President and be really proud of their president. You all have met her. She's just amazing, once in a lifetime leader, man. So a little bit about Arizona. We are the chemistry lab for all of these terrible ideas that are now being infected throughout this country. We have had our first, what they call empowerment scholarship accounts, ESAs, in order to kind of confuse people. Vouchers are the same things. They use the term ESAs. And they started in 2011 and in 2012. The initial intent was to really defray from fully funding public schools to allow students with severe disabilities to go to specialized schools. And for a lot of folks who are engaged in that policy, it sounded like a kind of good idea. Schools were having trouble meeting the needs of these students. And so that's where it started. And the slippery slope opened, and we have never been able to turn back. I'll make it clear, and I see other folks in the chat, is that we've elected great people. We had a ballot initiative that passed to try to stop this. We have a citizens initiative process here in Arizona. However, legislators who are funded by privatization efforts, the large folks, Project 2025 creators, have been funding these politicians because there is money to be made off of my son, my students, your children. They see our kids with dollar signs. They do not care about their growth. They do not care about their opportunities. And this has done severe damage in our state.
I'm so glad you connected those dots for everyone because I know folks don't know that corporations meddle in public education and they meddle in a way to particularly defund public education, which is very interesting. But some of those major corporations across the country are meddling in public education and probably, yeah. So, some of the, how can I say, some of the most devious tactics. Okay. Are being financially supported by corporations for this. Dr. Dang, you asked if we could go back. We heard about how vouchers exacerbate segregation. Are there other types of vouchers that we should be aware of? Is that the question you would like?
Yes,
Okay.
I also thought this would be important to set the ground as we continue to talk about vouchers. So I just want to share like the scary part. We're all hearing vouchers are often disguised as scholarships or pushed in the name of choice or parent empowerment. And proponents argue that vouchers give families choice, but it's quite the contrary because it's the private schools that end up doing the choosing of the students they want to accept, the students they want to expel, or even cancel out. Whereas public schools are required to accept all students by law. So I just want to mention that vouchers come in many forms. Marisol just mentioned ESA, so I wanted to explain what those are too. So education savings accounts, also known as ESAs for short, rather than giving taxpayer dollars directly to the private schools, the government deposit funds into a debit-like card that families use to pay for educational expenses. Due to the lack of transparency, accountability, and regulations, ESA vouchers open the doors for waste, fraud, and abuse. In some cases, Marisol, I'm looking at you in Arizona, funds have been spent on flat screen TVs, jewelries, and even kitchen appliances, right? Very unregulated. Another form of vouchers that I wanted to mention is the tax credit program. Individuals or corporations can receive a tax credit for donating to an organization often known as a scholarship granting organization. Folks, I'm so sorry, you're going to keep hearing SGO in the education space for quite some time. The SGO distributes vouchers disguised as scholarships. Candidly speaking, here we're talking about a form of money laundering. I just want to put that out there too. And what's more terrifying, despite the abundance of research and media coverage that document the harmful effects of vouchers on our students, educators, and the community, the nation's first ever federal voucher program was signed into law last summer. The federal voucher program takes shape as a tax credit program where individuals could donate up to $1,700 a year to an SGO. To participate in this federal voucher scheme, states would have to opt in on an annual basis, and in some cases, the governor would have the authority to decide for the state. But it's ultimately dictated by the state law whether it will be the governor, another individual, or agency. States can begin opting in as of this month, and states have already started opting in. And for the states that do opt in, individual taxpayers will be able to donate beginning with the 2027 tax year. This program, folks, creates a near universal entitlement program to private school funding. Households earning up to $300,000 of an area median gross income would qualify. I saw in the chat someone mentioned they're in DC. I'm also in the DC area. Those of us, not me here, making up to $485,000 a year, that's almost $500,000, would still qualify for this scholarship. My takeaway for everyone listening here is that vouchers, regardless of the name that they claim, whether it's the Hope Scholarship or the Family Empowerment Account, know that they were designed to undermine public education while creating a subsidy for the rich. So please remember, a voucher is a voucher is a voucher, and always refer to them as such and never call them by the name that is assigned to them by their proponents.
Thank you, Dr. Dang. And so just so we are on the same page, we're going to go for questions. I'm going to go to Marisol, then we're going to go back to Lynn, and then we'll go to Janelle because I'm going to have you guys lead into your questions. And so Marisol, I just want to know, okay, universal education savings accounts. We talked about those. That's crazy. What are the type of issues that you're seeing now in Arizona and around the state with these savings accounts?
Yeah, so I really want to be honest. In Arizona, there wasn't a dedicated funding stream to vouchers or ESAs or what we call in Arizona STOs, which are similar things to SGOs. And what that means is it has blown up to $800 million out of our general fund is going to these families unregulated. There's no transparency, and we have no idea. Remember, public schools are also one of the initial places where students are seen every day. We can check on their safety. So we have no idea what these kids are doing, what they're learning, if they're safe. We really have no idea. The other large impact that we really want to talk about here in Arizona, 80% of these students never went to a public school. That means these families have always made a decision to send their children to a private school or to homeschool them. They now are receiving anywhere from $7,000 plus a year more as a tax credit or a tax break to send their kids to these schools. Across the state, what it really has done is it has left thousands of kids. It's not the huge amount of kids, but thousands of kids unaccounted for. We have no idea about growth. We have no idea if they're safe. These are things that at the beginning, I think, the privateers thought, hey, we can make some money off our kids. But the reality is we're going to have a whole workforce of children that we have no idea what they have, what capacity they have to do. Also, I think one of the things for us that's really important, do not be like us. Learn from us of what not to do. We are consistently fighting back. We elected a great governor, Governor Hobbs, who is completely against vouchers, but we've had a controlling legislature for 60 years that loves this program. They probably are on a webinar right now in another state or the state you are in, telling people how great the Arizona program is and that they all should do the same thing. So it's important to arm your neighbors, talk to your friends who have children about the harms of this program to cut it off at the knees in your state before it gets worse.
Man, that is scary. But I'm glad, one, you got a good governor, the importance of voting, and hopefully we will right that ship in Arizona and get those folks proper education and proper service to every student that needs it. Dr. Dang, So we've got Arizona. She hinted that they're probably doing some advocacy in some other states. Where do we see these type of dangerous programs spreading throughout the country?
Oof. Unfortunately, voucher programs exist in over 30 states right now, and they expand on a nearly similar trajectory across state lines. So, as Marisol mentioned, like programs start off very small. They're often touted to serve a special population of students, let's say students with disabilities, and then expand to include, let's say, students from families with low income. And before you know it, there's the universal element that comes into play, where there's no income restriction and no requirement for the students to have ever even attended public school. And we see this in Ohio, Georgia, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. I'm going to call it Florida out for a minute. So their original ESA voucher program was aimed at students with IEPs, but now any Florida resident in grades K to 12 is eligible for a voucher. And Florida aggressively expanded their program. But this past summer, their General released a report which tracked how the state managed their funds of this $4 billion voucher program. And the report found that the Florida voucher program couldn't account for $270 million. The state had trouble tracking 30,000 students. The state also had to send a $4 million check to Orange County Public Schools to reimburse that district for funds that they should have received when the school year started. So, as we can see, vouchers hurt school districts, and yet policy decisions to expand these programs keep running contrary to true research and to the lived experiences of our students and their families. I'd love to see public schools get fully funded this aggressively at this speed, but that's not the case right now.
Thank you for that. And so they're on the horizon, they're spreading. And I think if you can make the difference, so because I do have some folks who actually know me on the call and are like, well, we need 1,000 signatures in Georgia to stop this legislation on the state level. So, Dr. Dang, if you can explain, there are state-based vouchers, but the program we are talking about is a federal program, correct?
Sure, Amanda. So there are, as I mentioned, 30 states with voucher programs. They're all state-based. The federal tax credit program that I mentioned, that's the first ever federal piece. So right now we're just talking about all forms of vouchers. They're so similar. It's just a matter of where that money is coming from.
Okay. And just a point of clarification, just so I know, if I'm in a state that already approved a voucher program, because we're getting that question a lot, then the governor decides to participate in this because the governor makes a decision if they're going to participate in the federal program, correct? So is it double vouchers in these
Well,
states or are
many
they?
of these states already have several voucher programs, so they're just adding to it.
Gotcha. That's
Mhm.
horrible. That is really how you can deplete a budget of public education. Oh, wow. Janelle, okay, we've talked about the states expanding, but I've heard things over and over again about they really do intentionally target Black and low income families around vouchers. What was the reasoning behind that? And like, how are these folks being impacted by participating in this type of program?
Yeah, great question. So I think that it goes back to when Marisol raised about how this whole lobby has basically fashioned education as like this marketplace, right? And so in the last few decades, they've started to use and by the way, this isn't just Project 2025. This has been going on for decades, this whole quote unquote school choice movement. So they started recently to use Black families as the face of this movement. So they say the education system is a marketplace and you should vote with your feet by leaving the public school system altogether. And they're really capitalizing on families who are in segregated, under-resourced, underfunded schools. Most places rely on property value to fund education. Well, if you know the history of redlining and discriminatory housing practices, a lot of communities of color, Black and brown, even if they tax themselves at higher rates, can't raise that same kind of education revenue. So unfortunately, we see those kind of resource disparities along racial and socioeconomic lines. But instead of focusing on reforming these school finance systems, this lobby says, look, a few of you can get these quote unquote vouchers, which are really partial partial funding of private education, and you can leave the public school system. But as many of you know, when a child leaves the public education system, the money follows the child. So that money goes with them, and it leaves all the other kids remaining in the public school system with less money. And so I think there are a couple of problems. So first of all, there's more than a couple of problems. But first of all, when you reframe public education as this whole marketplace, it really undermines public education as a public good to prepare students for democratic participation, right? Instead, it focuses on this like consumer gain, economic, social, and political advantage. And two things I really want to flag. First of all, the cost. And Lynn and Marcel brought this up already. These partial payments, et cetera, don't cover the full cost of private school tuition. Most of the vouchers average about $7,000 per student. So if you're an already wealthy family that already plan to send your kid to private school, great, you can just benefit from this. But if you are a lower income family, then you have to think about all the additional educational costs like transportation, books, supplies, technology, extracurriculars. Most of these private schools don't provide transportation. In 2023, the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy did a study, and they found that 99% of all voucher tax credits in Louisiana and 87% of those who use them in Virginia, these went to families with annual incomes of over $200,000 per year. Okay, so the second piece, and this has already been raised, but I just want to really underscore this. And someone in the chat asked a question about like legal violations. So under federal law, private schools that don't receive federal funds are not subject to most federal anti-discrimination provisions, right? And then if you add on a private religious school, then those schools can use religion as a pretext to discriminate. So that's how they're able to exclude students, students with disabilities, LGBTQ students, students who they feel have discipline issues or other issues. And again, these kind of religious exemptions are often widely interpreted. So basically, private schools, there's no universal guarantee. The way that we're guaranteed access to our public education system.
I'm gonna, oh, this is for Dr. Dang, but I want all of you to answer this question, which is the last question before we move into Q&A is, like, what are the impacts that you all are seeing in the various case studies that you've heard about when a child decides to participate in a voucher program? How is it hurting the broader population of students, and how are these students actually faring in the education system?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'm happy to kick us off. I know we're running tight on time here, so I'm going to try to popcorn some facts out for all of you. So there's no shortage of academic research, investigative news articles, and even state audits that scream vouchers are bad, ineffective, they're wasteful, right? They're harmful. So first, vouchers leave pandemic-sized impacts on student learning. Studies in Indiana, Ohio, Louisiana, and here in Washington, D.C. have shown impacts on test scores on par with the COVID-19 effects on student achievement. Let that sink in for a second there. We know that high-performing schools that do participate in voucher programs as well have no room for certain families, as Janelle has alluded to. In New Orleans, low-income families who did accept a voucher and prioritize academics when choosing a school were often rejected and were left to settle for like their third or fourth choices instead. Double whammy, something to know about voucher schools. They have high exit rates. Somewhere between 15 to 30% of students who do take a voucher go to the school and end up saying no thank you and return to their neighborhood school where they end up doing better. But mind you, the money that they brought to that school is left there with them. There's no refund. That money is not going back to their public school, right? And then also, I just want to mention voucher programs, especially in states that expand quickly, create revolving doors for school failure. Meaning, when a voucher program expands, people see this as an opportunity to make money. They open up schools to accept vouchers. And 40% of these voucher accepting schools open to subsequently shutter their doors in under 5 years, really screwing over our students, if you ask me. And then just the last thing, and I'll pass along, voucher programs also allow to discriminate against students using taxpayer dollars. Again, as Janelle mentioned, in states like Wisconsin, Indiana, Florida, it's not uncommon to see a voucher school being investigated for denying admission to like students of disabilities or those from LGBTQ plus families.
Ladies, if you don't mind, we're gonna go for 5 more minutes. We started late. Come on, just these people want this information. The chat's going crazy. Janelle.
I will just say we have no academic data in Arizona because there is no accountability or transparency built into the system. Yesterday, the superintendent of instruction was directly asked by a couple of teacher legislators, "What data do you show that our students are growing?" And he said, "We do collect no educational data on these students."
And a federal voucher program, just to piggyback on that briefly, the specific program that's included in federal legislation would not have accountability, oversight, tracking, et cetera. Some states do attach provisions like anti-discrimination provisions to their state-run voucher programs. That's not in this federal program. So you're talking about an unregulated voucher program. And by the way, private schools have rejected students. They've said things like enrollment is a privilege, it's not a right. If they don't agree with your family's lifestyle, quote unquote, they go through families' social media and they reject families. Or if they feel like a student is going to be too much of a challenge, they've rejected enrollment based on these kind of things. We can't have our public education system left only for those students who have with the greatest needs, who will have the least amount of money. We can't collectively give up on the public good of public education.
I love that. We can say that last sentence again. We cannot collectively.
Give up on the public good of public education.
Yes, we cannot. There's a question that's been kind of rolling. We've got several folks who are in states where voucher programs are happening. And they just want to know, like, what can they do now that the program's there? How can they fight? What's the advocacy that they can do? If any one of you guys want to take this question on.
Well, here in Arizona, we're doing a couple things. We are specifically going to areas and where there have been traditional legislators who continue to vote for this and holding them accountable. We're hosting our own meetings. We're meeting with parents who are disenfranchised from some of these places and asking them to amplify the message. More importantly, into the areas where we get ignored in high immigrant areas and students of color areas and high poverty areas, we're ignored and nobody wants to talk to us unless there's a crisis or a disaster. We need to be amplifying the great things that are happening in our public schools where everyone is accepted and where we make sure that everyone is safe and are meeting great academic expectations. So as parents, as grandparents, that's one thing we can do is talk about how great our schools are and support the great public school work that is happening.
Any other best practices for folks out there? Or
Sure, I'll just add a quick and simple one. If anyone here listening have had accepted a voucher and you've had a poor experience, talk about it. It's been so difficult identifying parents who are willing to talk about their experience, but we need to hear your voices. The legislators need to hear your voices.
yes, and I get that as a parent. You think you're making the right decision, you think you're doing the shiny thing and self-interest, and here you go and you probably have a little shame because now you've made a bad decision for your child's future. But I think even more, you were more than likely probably not told the full story, told the shiny parts and why it's so great. And I don't think you should feel shame. I think if anything, you should be upset that you were lied to, and you were now participating in this program that's more harmful to your child than actually, securing their future. Janelle, any final thoughts?
I'm looking at a comment in the chat about accountability and how people can use vouchers for transportation, technology, et cetera, whereas in public schools, that money is taken out of staff positions and they're still held to standards. But that's the key. Public schools are still held to standards. There's oversight, there's accountability. A lot of these private schools, and again, this federal program will not have oversight. It won't have accountability. There won't be data tracking. So we do have to think, what is the ultimate long-term cost to our kids, to public education as a public good, and not just, and I get to some of the points made about feeling trapped in an under-resourced, failing school system. But we need to spend our energy figuring out how we can implement policies that can improve public schools for everyone, rather than focusing on this failing marketplace that's really a race to the bottom.
Yes, absolutely. And so, someone says they're trying to privatize healthcare, they're trying to privatize education. And we have got to fight as a collective action to stop all this. And just so everyone knows, if you registered or were in attendance for this call tonight, you will get a recording. Our folks in the chat, Zara and Destiny, have been doing a great job. We want you to take action tonight. We want you to sign this, take action, email your governor to let them know not to participate. I'm going to give a shout out to the folks in Georgia because I know Georgia's on the call. Those Georgia, if you guys want to post your link in there, because I know we are in legislative session now and our governor just signed on to it. And I know you all need 1,000 signatures to stop that legislation. So help Georgia out too while you're at it. So Otha, if you're there, go ahead and post your call to action, which is immediate right now, in there as well. But more than anything, keep sending this out to folks, educate your folks, and let people know, one, you have the power to stop this. You have the power to speak up. Two, this is the future this is the future. And this is one of the biggest fights we have going forward. And each and one of us have the power to stop this horrible practice and make sure that this administration or the administration next is fully funding education so everyone can participate, not just a few. So thank you all tonight so much. We appreciate you and have a great night.